Today, we're previewing the 2020 Rolex 24 at Daytona by having a look at some of the very interesting entries to this year's edition of the race. This is Triple Crown Racing. Let's get into it. Hello everybody, and welcome along to my preview for the 2020 Rolex 24 at Daytona. Now, this is going to be sort of an impromptu video, as I haven't had time to write anything because, well, the Rolex 24 just kind of snuck up on me. I only a couple of days ago I realized it was race week, so I'm just going to be having a look at the entry list, the full entry list, which was uploaded to the motorsport.com website today, and I'll be previewing the race a bit. I'll be having a look at some of the entries, which there are some very interesting entries, and I'll be making some predictions for this year's race. And I've got my reading glasses on because I'm going to have to be doing some reading. There's been quite a few very interesting entries into this year's edition of the race, and we'll be having a look at that by class. Now, the off-season has been very, very interesting. JDC Miller Motorsport, they obviously have two cars, the 5 and the 85, but the number 5 car now has the Mustang Sampling Racing sponsorship deal, as Action Express has downsized to 2 cars, so they're just hanging on to the Whelen Engineering Racing machine. And, well, that means that Mustang Sampling has gone over to JDC Miller Motorsport, and there's been quite a few changes to that lineup. So we'll be going over the lineup for the number 5 car. Because of what happened in IndyCar with Dale Coyne Racing, Sebastian Bourdais was left without a drive. So what he has done is he has joined the number 5 lineup for the full IMSA season, alongside Joao Barbosa, with Loic Duval coming in for the endurance races. So that is going to be a really, really strong lineup. Sebastian Bourdais, very talented in sports car racing. He was, I believe, for the past few years, he's been part of the Ford GT program, which has been very, very successful. And he's got a long history in sports car racing as well as Indy cars. He's definitely a talent, so that should be a lineup to watch out for. The number 5 Cadillac in the hands of JDC Miller Motorsport and Mustang Sampling. And of course, he's joined by two talented sports car drivers. On the other JDC Miller Motorsport lineups, the number 85 car. Well, another person who's decided to cut and run from IndyCar is Matthias Leist, who was driving for Dale Coyne, but because his results have been sort of lackluster, he's cut and run, and he's decided to join JDC Miller Motorsport as well. Matthias Leist is joined by Juan Piedrahita, Chris Miller, and Tristan Vautier. Now, Chris Miller, he's been part of JDC Miller Motorsport for a long time and is heavily involved with the team. Tristan Vautier, very talented sports car driver. Well, so yes, that's a very, very strong lineup with some great talents on it. Another one to watch out for from JDC Miller Motorsport. Of course, we have to talk about Team Penske. However, there hasn't really been that many changes to either the 6 or the 7 lineup. So, Juan Pablo Montoya, joined by Dane Cameron and Simon Pagenaud, is the endurance driver for that lineup. Then, in the number 7, it's Elio Castroneves, Ricky Taylor, and Alexander Rossi is the endurance driver. So, not really any changes to the lineup for Team Penske for this year, which is a good thing because, well, this driver combination has obviously proven to be very, very successful. So, we should probably talk about Wayne Taylor Racing, and this lineup has seen, well, quite a few changes, actually. I mean, obviously, Ford leaving the sport, that's had massive implications on the IMSA driver market, and quite a few people from the Ford program were looking for drives after the program ended. So Ryan Briscoe, coming over from Chip Ganassi, has joined the number 10 Wayne Taylor Racing lineup. Renger van der Zande, he's still on the lineup, and he's an incredibly talented sports car racer, and, well, obviously that's a good full-time combination. Now, there are 2 endurance drivers on the Wayne Taylor lineup for the Rolex 24, Scott Dixon and Kamui Kobayashi. Now, Kobayashi was part of the team last year for when Fernando Alonso was racing at the Rolex 24. Scott Dixon, he was on the Ford lineup, but obviously Ford are gone, so he's had to, well, he was an incredibly talented driver, so I'm not at all surprised that he was snapped up by a team like Wayne Taylor Racing. So yes, he's on the Wayne Taylor Racing lineup, and that's a strong lineup, and they're probably going to be ones to look out for the race victory. Mind you, the entire DPI field seems to be quite strong. We'll move on to another very, very well-known car. It's the now lone, as in single, Action Express Cadillac, the number 31 Whelen Engineering car. Pipo Derani, he remains on the lineup, as well as Felipe Nasr. Felipe Albuquerque, he's joined the lineup as well. And Mike Conway rounds off the driver lineup for the number 31. Whelen Engineering, well, the Whelen Engineering car, it's always successful, it's always competitive, so expect them to be right in the mix of things. Moving on to Mazda. Mazda have had, they've had a difficult time at the Rolex 24 and in IMSA in general. I mean, and ever since the start of the DPI category, Mazda, they've had problems trying to get to the hang of the RT 24P, which will change hands to Yost, and this is the final year that will... Actually, I think it's the second last race that the Mazdas will be in the hands of Team Yost as they're pulling out after Sebring. So that'll be interesting to see what that does to the driver market. But anyhow, that's what the situation is at the moment. Jonathan Bomarito, Harry Tinknell, and Ryan Hunter-Ray being the endurance driver. That makes up the lineup for the number 55. And the number 77 is occupied by Tristan Nunez, Oliver Jarvis, and Olivier Pla. So not really any changes to the Mazda lineup. However, I mean, I know the car blew up last year. But the thing is, though, the RT24P, I'll just call it the Mazda from now on, actually. It's a fast car when it's not exploding. So if it can do the race distance, I genuinely think this is Mazda's year. I think one of the Mazdas will win the race if they can get to the end. And I think it'd be nice to see Mazda win a couple of endurance races. So Mazda, well, actually, okay, I'll go over my predictions for DPI. I think it's going to be Mazda if the car doesn't blow up, and if it's not Mazda, if it's not either of the two Mazdas, it'll either be Wayne Taylor or Team Penske. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, but those are my predictions. Moving on to LMP2, and, well, we're seeing a few more cars for this year, and unfortunately, it's down to 5 cars. It should be 6, and I'll talk about that in a second. I mean, we've talked about, well, LMP2, it's been a difficult start to it being its own class in IMSA. We only had 2 full-time cars last year, but luckily for the 24, we have 5 cars on the entry list. So the number 8 car, Tower Motorsport by Starworks. It's Ryan DL with John Ferrano, David Heinemeier Hansen, and Nico Lapierre on the number 8 car. In the Orica, actually, I should mention that all of the LMP2 cars in the Rolex 24, they're all Oricas, so it should be pretty close. Starworks, they're returning to prototype racing after quite a while, and that's a strong lineup, actually. Ryan DL, he was previously part of the Nissan program, so he's no stranger to prototypes. Neither is Nico Lapierre, and, well, Starworks, they might be one to watch out for. Now, the number 18, Era Motorsport. They're not drivers that I particularly know. It's Kyle Tilley, Dwight Merriman, Nicholas Manassian, and Ryan Lewis. I haven't really heard of any of these guys. It might just be me being ignorant, but I haven't heard of them, so I can't really comment on Era Motorsport. What I can comment on is Performance Tech. Now, Performance Tech, they're good with their P2s, and the number 38 car is occupied by Cameron Castles, Kyle Masson, Robert Masson, and Don Yont. Pier 1 Matthiasen Motorsport. Now, these guys, are very, very familiar when it comes to IMSA P2 racing, and I believe they actually won the championship last year. So it's Simon Trimmer, Gabriel Aubry, Nick Bouillet, and Ben Keating, all very, very talented sports car drivers. Simon Trimmer, fantastic driver. Gabriel Aubry, brilliant. Nick Bouillet, brilliant. And Ben Keating. Ben Keating is probably, if you watched last year's Le Mans, you'll know who Ben Keating is. Very talented driver. Unfortunately got disqualified in the Ford. Now, moving on to the final lineup in LMP2, it's the number 81 Dragon Speed lineup, which is occupied by Ben Hanley, Henrik Hedman, Colin Brown, and Harrison Newey. Oh my goodness, what a lineup that is. Ben Hanley, massively talented sports car driver, getting involved with IndyCar last year, was involved with the Dragon Speed LMP1 program. Henrik Hedman, very talented as well. Colin Brown is probably one of the most talented, he's probably, I think he's possibly the most talented driver possibly in IMSA. His 2018 performance was absolutely stunning. His 2019 performance, he wasn't given the greatest car in the Nissan. And, Harrison Newey, son of Adrian Newey, again, another very, very talented racing driver. Now, down to predictions. I think it's going to be Dragon Speed. That is such a strong lineup, such a strong team that is very, very familiar with the P2s. My money's on the number 81 Dragon Speed lineup for the win in LMP2. Moving on to GT Le Mans. We'll start with Corvette because they're first on the list. Now, this is a team that sort of has seen quite a bit of change. The number 3 Corvette racing lineup is occupied by Antonio Garcia, Jordan Taylor, and Nicky Katzberg, and the number 4 lineup is occupied by Oliver Gavin, Tommy Milner, and Marcel Fazler. Now, you'll notice that Jordan Taylor and Nicky Katzberg are now on the team because, Jan Magnussen, I haven't seen him on the entry list yet, and Jan Magnussen, he's a massively talented driver. Now, I think Corvette and Magnussen, they both came to the mutual agreement that he shouldn't be on the Corvette racing lineup anymore, despite having enjoyed massive amounts of success with the team. But Corvette, they're coming in with a new car this year in the C8R, obviously getting rid of the front-engined C7. Now, they'll probably have to adapt to running the mid-engine layout, and this will be the first race for the C8R. However, from what I've been hearing, it's been a pretty good car so far. So they are working out a new car, so there may be some technical gremlins, but if there aren't too many, I'm expecting Corvette to be in the mix of things. To BMW, who are coming back with the M8 GTE. Now, this is a car that's had mixed success. It's known among race fans as the Big Mate. BMW actually won last year's race, so I think after a while now, they're starting to get the M8 worked out. So there had been a few driver lineup changes for BMW. I'm pretty sure the 24 lineup remains most of the same in John Edwards and Jesse Kron, and then it's Augusto Farfus and Chaz Mostert. Chaz Mostert being a very, very well-known supercars driver, coming back to the 24 lineup, and the number 25 car is Conor De Felipe. Bruno Spengler, who is actually doing the full season for the first time, having come over from DTM. Then it's Colton Herta, brilliant IndyCar driver, and I believe he's done reasonably well in what little sports car racing he has done, and Philip Eng. So if they can carry over their success from last year, expect BMW to do well. Now, this is the next car I'm going to talk about is one that many people are rooting for in this year's Rolex 24. The number 62, Risi Competizione Ferrari. Now, Risi Competizione, they're not the richest of teams. However, they are underdogs and they, can produce great performances. If I remember correctly, they won last year's Motul Petit Le Mans. So, obviously, they're capable of winning races. However, they sort of are inconsistent budget-wise. I mean, they wrecked a car in 2018 and at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and it completely ruined their momentum. They pull out of sports car racing for a long time. However, for the Rolex 24, they've brought a plethora of Ferrari factory drivers, all very talented. So you have James Calado, Alessandro Pierguidi, Daniel Serra, and Davide Rigon. Now, if you're into your sports car racing, if you're into the WEC, if you're into your GT racing, you'll recognize all of those names as Ferrari regulars. So if Risi Competizione can deal with whatever issues they have, definitely they'll be competitors for the win. I personally think that one of the next two cars that I'm about to read out to you will win the race. And these two cars are obviously from Porsche. Not really anything out of the ordinary driver lineup-wise. It's Nick Tandy, Frederick McVecchi, and Matt Campbell on the 911 lineup. And in the 912, it's Earl Bamber, Lawrence Vantour, and Matthew Jaminet completing the Porsche lineup. I'm not sure if Matt Campbell did the Rolex 24 last year, but Matt Campbell, he's proved himself as a very talented young Porsche driver from Australia. So go Australia represent. Now, and all of these guys, you know, if you've seen your sports car racing, if you know a bit about Porsche factory drivers, you'll recognize all of those names. And I think Porsche will win this year's race. Now, I know that car is relatively new, having only participated in a couple of races. However, it has proven itself to be extremely fast. And from what I've been hearing, Porsche have really got themselves sorted. And I know Porsche are pretty much always sorted, but apparently this car is fantastic from what I've been hearing. Now, you'd say arguably Corvette have the new C8R sorted out, but I don't think they have it as sorted as Porsche, because obviously Porsche have some racing experience with this car. So, talented drivers, car that's working relatively well. I think it'll be Porsche for GT Le Mans. Now, moving on to GT Daytona. Well, it is a massive class. You have AM drivers here, and you have sort of semi-factory cars. So I won't be going through all of the cars, because there's simply just too many of them. I'll go over some of the ones that really stand out. So we'll start with Aim Vassar Sullivan with their Lexus RCF GT3. In the number 12, it's Townsend Bell, Frankie Montecalvo, Shane Van Gisbergen, and Aaron Tellitz. Now, Shane Van Gisbergen, he recently made his prototype racing debut at the Ben Motorsport Park for the Asian Le Mans Series, the 4-hour race there. Shane Van Gisbergen, he's obviously proven his worth in sports car racing, so he's on the Aim Vassar Sullivan lineup, so that's a star-studded lineup again, also with Townsend Bell. On the number 14 lineup, you have Jack Hawksworth, Parker Chase, Kyle Busch, and Michael De Quesada completing the lineup. Now, Jack Hawksworth and Parker Chase, you'll know who those two are, and you'll definitely know who Kyle Busch is if you're into your NASCAR. That is a star-studded lineup, and it's really cool that we're getting NASCAR drivers coming over for the Rolex 24. So it's star-studded, but will they perform? That remains to be seen. Moving on to one of the newer lineups for the Rolex 24, it's Gear Racing powered by GRT Grasser with their Lamborghini Huracan, obviously, because it's Grasser Racing. They specialize in Lamborghinis. And this is an all-female lineup, which is occupied by Catherine Legg, Christina Nielsen, Rahel Frey, and Tatiana Calderon. Now, Catherine Legg, Christina Nielsen, well established in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. Rahel Frey, I don't really know the name, but I definitely know who Tatiana Calderon is. Perhaps she'll be better in a GT car than she was in Formula 2. One that really, really got people talking. Aston Martin are returning to the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship for the first time in a long time, as is Heart of Racing, who is a charity that is involved with the Seattle Children's Hospital, who raise money by every lap they do. They're making the return to IMSA, so that is a welcome return. You have Alex Riberas, Roman DeAngelis, Ian James, and Nicky Thiem, who is famously part of the Dane train. Now, with Aston Martin, if they can get that car working in IMSA, then they expect them to do pretty well. Nicky Thiem, massively famous Aston Martin driver, especially in the motorsport community anyway. That'll be one to watch out for. Oh, we need to talk about this. Hold on, where was I? Oh, yeah, okay. So, number 74, Riley Motorsports, the Mercedes. It's Lawson Assenbach, Gar Robinson, Ben Keating, and Felipe Fraga. Now, you will probably have noticed that Ben Keating is in 2 cars. He's also an LMP2. So I thought I'd just point that out. Riley Motorsport and Mercedes, they've done really, really well in IMSA over the past few years. And I think the final battle at the Motorsport Petit Le Mans they were involved with in the 2019 edition of the race. Well, Ben Keating, he's on 2 lineups, so it'll be interesting to see how he does juggling 2 different cars in 2 different classes. Now, we'll finish our preview off with one that I think is very, very interesting, and one that a lot of people are very, very interested in. Aston Martin have brought not 1, but 2 cars to the Rolex 24, and they've actually brought a factory car in GTD in the number 98 Aston Martin racing car. How cool is that to see Aston Martin Racing officially in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, the factory lineup? So you have Pedro Lamy, Matthias Lauda, Ross Gunn, and Andrew Watson. Now, you'll probably know who Pedro Lamy and Matthias Lauda are. They've been, involved with the WEC, involved with Aston Martin, been very, very successful. And I think as I said with Heart of Racing, if Aston Martin can get their car worked down IMSA, expect them to do very, very well. So, if I'm going to talk about my predictions for the GT Daytona victory, I think perhaps FAF Motorsports with Zach Robichon, Dennis Olsen, Lars Kern, and Patrick Pilet. Porsche, they do well with sports car racing, and I don't think GTD will be an exception. I'm not really sure who's going to win this, but I'd watch out for the gear racing entry, for Grasser Racing, the number 11 car. Also watch out for Aim Vassar Sullivan with the Lexus, Lexi, as some people like to call them, with, of course, Kyle Busch and Shane Van Gisbergen on those lineups. And definitely look out for Aston Martin Racing, as well as probably along with Riley Motorsport. So those are my predictions for GT Daytona. And that's going to do it for this Daytona 24-hour preview. This, again, was a bit impromptu. I didn't even have a script for this one. I was just reading off the entry list. But, I mean, I know the car count is lower than it may have been in previous years. And we did actually lose 1 car. I should mention this. In LMP2, it should be 6 cars, but we just lost one a couple of days ago. We lost Rick Ware Racing from the entry list a couple of days ago due to funding issues and due to driver lineup issues, because all the drivers left the team after the Raw test session. So, unfortunately, we're down to 5 cars. And actually, the entry list for the Rolex 24 and the championship as a whole is smaller than it usually is. That said, the quality of the entry list is very, very high. Lots of star-studded names, lots of really strong cars and teams and driver lineups. And I think even with a smaller grid than we'd usually expect, it should be a fantastic race, as all Rolex 24s tend to be, at least all the ones I've seen anyway. And, I can't wait. Why don't you tell me your predictions in the comments below? I read all of your comments, so you may as well say something. Follow the TCR Instagram for all the latest and greatest motorsport news. I'm also trying to be more active on Twitter, so it's @RacingTriple for the TCR Twitter, or if you just want to follow me personally, I'm @MackenzieMusing. Link to those in the description too. We need some new blood on the Discord server, so if you aren't already a part of that, link in the description as well. My goal for 2020 is reaching 200 subscribers by the end of the year, but as I've been seeing with a few racing YouTubers getting 1,000 subscribers overnight, I would quite like my big break this year as well, come to think of it. Anyway, if I do reach 200 subscribers by the end of the year, I have something very special planned if that happens. And that is going to do it from me. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.